You ever witness someone's whole world just collapse right in front of your eyes? I have. I was standing smack in the middle of my backyard, sun beating down, when the county surveyor's hand started shaking as he looked at his own numbers. His face went sheet white, just as Helen Bennett, the queen bee of our neighborhood, clipboard warrior extraordinaire, stood there totally frozen, her mouth hanging open like she'd seen a ghost. 20 years of terrorizing this street, just wiped away in a single afternoon, and half the neighbors were out back, pretending to water their petunias while they watched the spectacle. And you know what? Right behind us, my so-called eyesore of a fence, the one Helen had tried to demolish since day one, was just sitting there in all its glory, stubborn, legal, and way more dignified than anyone in the yard that day. There's a special kind of joy in watching justice finally show up. Part of you wants to laugh, part of you wants to cry, but mostly you just want to sit down and breathe because it actually happened. But hey, let me back up a sec. This didn't all start with showdown in the backyard. My name's Thomas Hughes. Yeah, that Thomas, civil engineer, gray hair, still thinks he's got all the answers. A few years back, I packed up my life from 30 years on construction sites. Jackhammers, city traffic, union guys yelling over concrete mixers, and moved to Maplewood Estates, dreaming of barbecues and lazy Sundays. I thought I'd found the promised land, quiet streets, neighbors who waved, yards that could pass for putting greens, and a homeowners association that actually seemed reasonable. Honest to God, I thought I was set for life. No one warned me about Helen Bennett. Ask around Maplewood and you'll hear Helen stories that'll curl your toes. She's the one who handed out violation notices for dandelions, fines for mailboxes painted the wrong shade of black, started crusades against swing sets and solar panels, and God help you if your dog barked after dinner. She wasn't just the HOA president. She was the unofficial mayor, judge, and executioner. She'd spin up new rules out of thin air and convinced half the neighborhood she had friends in every back room at the county courthouse. Nobody crossed Helen. At least, not until I showed up. So, picture this. 2 weeks after I move in, I'm sweating buckets under that sticky Georgia sun, trying to put up a regular old 6-foot cedar fence. Same kind everybody else had. Permits signed, survey double-checked, HOA approval taped right to the post just like the book says. Then, like she'd been summoned out of thin air, Helen just materializes at my gate. No hello, no welcome to the neighborhood. Just arms crossed, lips pursed so tight I thought they'd snap. Unauthorized structure. Community standards violation. Remove it immediately. And she points that clipboard at me like she's casting a spell. Now, I'm not looking for a fight. I smile. I show her my paperwork, the permits, the survey, that precious HOA approval, still warm from the printer. She doesn't even look at them, just sniffs and says the approval was a mistake and my fence is obviously encroaching on community property. If I don't take it down, she'll hit me with daily fines and legal action. For a second, I genuinely thought I was on some kind of prank show. But Helen? She was dead serious. And that's when it got personal. Suddenly, every morning, my mailbox had a brand new violation notice. Grass half an inch too long, mailbox not a standard shade. The font on my house number's inconsistent with community aesthetic. She called a meeting, painted me as the neighborhood troublemaker, said I was dragging down property values. The final straw? She convinced the board to slap me with a $500 daily fine until the fence was gone, said I was blocking access to the drainage easement, even got an emergency injunction stamped with all the official seals and signatures. Most people would have folded. Heck, most people had. But Helen didn't know me. She had no idea I'd spent 30 years in the weeds of zoning law, reading plat maps for fun, and arm wrestling city inspectors over millimeters of sidewalk. Bullies like Helen rely on fear and confusion, hoping you'll cave before you ever check the actual rules. Instead of panicking, I got to work. I spent nights digging through property records, ancient HOA meeting minutes, and Helen's own enforcement history. And guess what I found? Helen had been playing fast and loose for years. Her fancy shed, 6 inches over her property line. The big fountain out front, 2 feet taller than regulations. The driveway extension, never even permitted, just appeared one day and nobody said a word. Meanwhile, my fence was set back even more than it needed to be. The original survey? Done by Samuel Reyes, best in the business, not a crooked bone in his body. Now here comes the twist. Turns out I wasn't alone. Once word got out I was fighting back, neighbors started popping up with their own stories. Rachel, fined for her tomato plants. Jonathan, had to repaint his whole house because Helen didn't like how the sun hit it. Ashley wanted solar panels, but Helen said the glare would damage the peace of the neighborhood, even though Helen's best friend had the exact same panels on her roof. It was a pattern. Helen went after anyone she didn't like, let her friend slide, and no one had ever called her out. So I built my case. I called Samuel Reyes, asked if he'd back up his survey. He said he'd testify in court if it came to that. I demanded a formal hearing with the entire HOA board. No more of Helen's side chats with her cronies. Helen tried to scare me, muttered about legal fees and embarrassment. But this time, she was the one sweating. When the hearing finally came around, Helen strutted into the community center like she was walking the red carpet, binder full of evidence. Half of it looked like it came off a bad Google search. She tried to paint me as the loose cannon threatening Maplewood's harmony. Then she got real specific, claimed my fence definitely crossed the property line, that Samuel Reyes must have been bribed, and, get this, even implied Samuel, the most honest guy around, was in on it. Well, Samuel stood up, calm as can be, and took apart every single one of her claims, explained his process in plain English. Then I showed the board photos of Helen's own violations. The shed, the fountain, the driveway, every single one left untouched by the HOA she ran like her own private fiefdom. The whole room went quiet. For the cherry on top, I presented a letter from the county, signed and stamped, saying my fence was legal, permitted, and that they'd received an anonymous complaint but found 0 violations. Helen went from smug to sweaty in 60 seconds, trying to argue, but nobody was buying it. The board voted. My fence stayed. All fines dropped. They even had to send me a written apology. You'd think that'd be the end. Not Helen. She threatened to take it to the county. Her famous last words. See, all those connections she bragged about? Smoke and mirrors. I requested an official county survey and made sure Helen got a front row seat. Richard Howard, the county surveyor, shows up with his high-tech GPS gear and an old-school steel tape, just to be thorough. Helen is buzzing around, pointing at rocks, muttering about misplaced stakes, bad satellites, whatever she could come up with. Richard just keeps working. After 2 hours, he calls everyone over. Mr. Hughes' fence, he says, is exactly where it should be, set back, not touching community property. Then, just for fun, he checks Helen's shed and fountain. Both break the same rules she'd use to fine half the neighborhood. The paperwork was bulletproof. The board dropped everything against me, turned around, and started writing up fines for Helen. Word got out. Neighbors who'd been scared to even look at Helen started telling their own stories. Janet, fined for planting hydrangeas. Ashley, back with her solar panels. Even Noah Richardson, whose memorial garden for his late wife Helen tried to have ripped up. Next HOA meeting, people were lining up to speak. Rachel, Jonathan, Ashley, Noah, all stood up, told their stories, and demanded Helen step down. Public backlash, legal threats, you name it. I could have sued her for harassment and defamation, and she knew it. Helen resigned, put out a half-hearted apology in the newsletter, and put her house up for sale. But with a mile-long list of complaints and violations, she had to drop the price so low it probably hurt her soul more than anything I ever did. The fountain came down, the shed got moved, and one day Helen left Maplewood for good, tail between her legs, never looked back. Here's the best part. The board changed. New folks stepped up. Rules got clearer. Enforcement was fair, not personal. They even hired a management company. No more petty vendettas, no more midnight mailbox violations. Property values started climbing. Neighbors actually started helping each other instead of spying through the blinds. They even put together a home improvement fund, encouraged people to make their houses better instead of punishing every little slip. It was like the sun finally broke through after a 20-year thunderstorm. And my fence? Still there. Still keeping my dog from terrorizing squirrels. Still reminding me what happens when you stand up to a bully. But more than that, it's a symbol for me and my neighbors and anyone moving in that you don't have to take it when someone in power decides to make your life miserable. You stand up. You use the facts, the law, and most importantly, your community. That's how bullies lose. Looking back, I learned something big. People like Helen only win if we let them keep us scared and divided. If you push back, stand together, and put the truth out in the open, even the nastiest tyrant falls. Maplewood's a real neighborhood again, a place where people talk, help, and look out for each other, not just a bunch of houses ruled by one angry clipboard. So let me ask you, what would you have done? Would you have fought, or just ripped out the fence and moved on? Ever had your own Helen, making life miserable until someone finally pushed back? Share your HOA horror stories, your thoughts on justice, whatever you've got. I want to hear them. Who knows? Maybe your battle will be the next neighborhood legend. And remember, sometimes it just takes one stubborn fence to change everything.